Is it normal that my father still hits me even as an adult? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. When I was a kid and I got in trouble, my dad would hit me. I always knew to expect it, so it wasn't a really big deal. But of course, I would do my best to stay out of trouble. Sometimes he would use a belt and sometimes he would slap me across the face. The slapping was the worst part. From the ages of 10 to 12, I didn't really get hit because I never got in trouble. When I turned 14, things started getting rough. I wanted to date boys and my dad was not having it. So his form of punishment sometimes was even taking food away from me. This happened on 2 occasions when I was 14 and I almost ran away because of it. I know most of you are thinking that my mom should have stepped in, but my mom was pretty afraid of my dad too. Sometimes I feel like my parents have brainwashed me into thinking that what my dad is doing is fine. The sad part is that I'm now 20 and my dad still hits me from time to time. I do have to say my father has always been there for me. He's provided me with a great life and a good education. And it's not like he would just hit me out of nowhere. It was only when I got in trouble and for specific reasons. But I do think he needs to stop it because I'm 20 now. Here's where things get really messy. I just got engaged and my fiance hates my father. Follow for part 2. Is it normal that my father still hits me as an adult? Now that I'm 20 and engaged, I told my fiance about what my father did. Like I said, my father wouldn't just hit me out of nowhere. He would only do it when he was punishing me and for specific reasons. But my fiance loathes my father. He thinks it's abuse and that it wasn't a normal thing for me to have to endure as a child, especially as an adult. And I've only come to realize that what my dad is doing is probably wrong because of my fiance. Before that, I never had anybody in my life tell me that what my dad was doing was wrong. But here's what happened. My fiance and I were cooking in my parents' kitchen. My dad must have been in a really bad mood because he comes into the kitchen and says, "If you don't clean up this mess, I'm gonna show your fiance how I slap the shit out of you." My father had never shown that side of him in front of my fiance. But as soon as those words came out of my father's mouth, my fiance turned to him and said, "You will never put your hands on her again." And my dad said, "That's my daughter and I can do whatever I want." My fiance asked me to leave with him and I did. My mom called us and begged us to come back, but my fiance said no. Part 3 is Is it normal that my father still hits me as an adult? After my fiance stood up to my dad, we didn't speak to my family for about 2 months. That's when my fiance asked me to go to therapy. And I did. That's when I found out that what I really needed to do was fix my relationship with my father. Because he had always punished me physically, I held a lot of resentment towards him. And my father being very antiquated, he thought that he was doing the right thing. Now let me clear a few things up. He only hit me twice when I was an adult. Once when I was 19, I got a bad grade in one of my classes and he flipped out. He slapped me across the face and told me that that would teach me to do better. The second time was right after my 20th birthday. I had gotten into an argument with my mom that really wasn't such a big deal. My mom and I worked things out, but my dad thought it was inappropriate that I spoke to my mom like that. Was I very disrespectful? No. But to him, it was completely unacceptable. So he hit me once with his belt. My fiance is refusing to invite my parents to our wedding. And to be honest, I kind of agree with him. Ever since stepping away from my parents, I have so much more confidence. I'm also happier in my relationship because I'm getting to be myself. And I'm not afraid that anyone will punish me. But I do feel guilty. I want to reach out to my parents. I'm not sure. What should I do? Story time about how my husband left me for my twin brother. I, female, 25, have been married to my husband for 6 months. When we started dating, it was just casual. I never thought I would marry this man, but it happened. We had a pregnancy scare, and that's when he told me that if I was pregnant, that he would marry me. We took a few pregnancy tests, and most of them came out positive. So we were convinced we were having a kid together. Of course, he asked me to marry him, and not until 3 months later did we decide to go to the doctor. And as soon as we got to the doctor, they said, "You're not pregnant." We couldn't believe it, but nonetheless, we were still married. He and I weren't exactly soulmates. When we started dating, we had a lot of fun together, but my friends would always make comments about him possibly being gay. I never took him seriously because he was interested in me, a woman. Sometimes my male friends would say, "Oh, he stares at me a lot," or that he would ask them to go out for drinks by themselves. I thought he was just trying to be nice and getting to know my friends. Obviously, I was wrong. My twin brother and I don't have a really close relationship. We had a falling out when he found out that I was pregnant. He thought I was ruining my life by having a kid, but it turns out I wasn't pregnant. So we started getting close again. He would come over to our house and spend a lot of time with my husband and I. But then I realized that they were doing naughty things together. Follow for part 2. Story time about how my husband left me for my twin brother. I would come home and find my twin brother on the couch with my husband. Of course, I just thought they were trying to get to know each other. I mean, we just got married and all. Got to the point where my brother was coming over to my place every single day. And my husband and him would hang out all day together. My husband works from home, so he's always there. I own my own business, so I'm usually not home before 3 p.m. Every time I would come home, my twin brother was already there. Eventually, I told my twin brother he needed to give me and my new husband our privacy. That's when he said that I was overreacting and that he was just trying to get to know him. Then he said, "Are you jealous?" I looked him straight in the face and I said, "Why should I be jealous? You're my twin brother." Then he laughed, got up, and left my house. And just like that, I knew something was going on. In part 1, I told you guys about those friends that warned me about my husband being gay. I decided to call on my friends and ask them to tell me why they thought my husband might be gay. They gave me lists. And I started writing everything down. And everything started connecting. I'd come to the realization that I married a gay man and that he was possibly having an affair with my twin brother. I mean, could things get worse? I decided to confront my husband. What he told me literally shocked me. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my husband left me for my twin brother. I confronted my husband. He told me that my brother essentially had been following him around and wouldn't leave him alone. In other words, he was putting all the blame on my brother. But instead of believing him right away, I grilled him. Started asking him questions about his past, like why he had never had a relationship before me with another woman, why all of my friends, literally all of them, thought he was gay. Of course, he denied everything, so I got on the phone and called my brother. I asked him to come over really quick, and he did. And of course, I started interrogating him too. That's when I told my husband to repeat what he had told me. But he couldn't. He looked at my brother and said, "Sorry, I told her the truth." My brother said, "Which is?" And my husband says, "You won't leave me alone and that you've been harassing me." That's when my brother tried to swing at him. Then my brother spilled all the beans. He said that on my wedding night, my husband and him made out. And that after that, my brother would come to our house after I left every single morning to be with my husband and to do all the nasty things they wanted to do to each other. My brother told me that the one who started it was my husband. I looked at my husband and he couldn't deny anything. I divorced him the next day. My now ex is trying to convince my brother to be in a relationship with him, but he doesn't want to. And my dad is hunting my ex down. Bye. Story time about how my boyfriend shames me for having cellulite. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. I'm 24 years old and my boyfriend is 21. According to him, he has never been with any girl who's had cellulite before, or even an ounce of body fat. Yes, I know what you're thinking, he's a total asshole, which in that sense, he is. But the rest of the time, he's completely fine and actually sweet. We met last year at a friend's party. At the party, I instantly fell in love with him. I thought he was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my entire life. And it was reciprocated. I saw him from across the room and he made eye contact. A few minutes later, he walked over to me and just struck up a conversation. I know that people present themselves the way they want to be seen, especially when they're trying to impress someone they're attracted to. He started telling me about how he's studying to be a doctor, how he volunteers at animal shelters, and that every single weekend he also volunteers at the soup kitchen. Everything he said was absolutely perfect. By the end of the night, he had asked me out on a date and I said yes. I did explain to him that I didn't want anything serious and he said that was totally fine. I was trying to focus on my studies, so having a boyfriend was not in my plans. But after we went on 7 dates, he asked me to be his girlfriend. He wouldn't take no for an answer. After about a month, I finally said yes. Mind you, at this point, he hadn't seen me naked, not even in a bathing suit. The very night that I said yes to being his girlfriend, he asked me to come over to his place. He made a whole gourmet dinner, even bought super expensive wine. So we ended up doing it for the first time that night. The next morning when I woke up, the first thing he said to me was, "Do you ever exercise?" I was shocked. Part 2 is up. Story time about how my boyfriend shames me for having cellulite. Disclaimers are not my story time, I sent me on Instagram. That's when he said point blank, super serious, "Do you ever exercise?" I just stared at him. I had literally just woken up in his bed after the first time we ever did it. Then I thought he must be joking. So I started to laugh a little, and then he says, "No, seriously, do you ever exercise?" I said, "Sometimes." Then he told me, "You should really try to work out at least 5 times a week." I went home and finally texted him saying that I wasn't comfortable with the way he spoke to me. That's when he said that what he said to me was completely normal, and that I shouldn't be offended. This was all in text, by the way. That's when he sends me another text message saying, "You know, you wouldn't have as much cellulite as you do if you didn't eat so much fast food. And if you exercise 5 times a week like I told you." I didn't reply to him for the rest of the day. Later that day, he shows up to my apartment and says, "You know, I should feel comfortable enough to tell you what I think about you." He somehow ended up making me feel bad and I ended up apologizing. Obviously, after that, I became really self-conscious about my cellulite and my entire body. So anytime we were together, I would always stay under the covers. By the way, my boyfriend doesn't have a great body. He's super soft and pudgy. Last week, he told me that he had abs though. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my boyfriend shames me for having cellulite. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. One day he pulls up his shirt and says, "Look, I have abs." Which, no, he doesn't. He's super soft and has a thick layer of fat on it. I smirked and he said, "What?" And I said, "You don't have abs." Then he says, "Yes, I do. I'm in better shape than you." By the way, he said this in front of his friends, so I was super embarrassed and stayed quiet the entire day. He finally went to drop me off and I was so happy to be home. But he decided to come upstairs with me. Got straight into my PJs. And when I came out of my bedroom, he says, "Wow, your cellulite's getting worse by the day." That's when I finally broke. I turned around and started yelling at him. I told him he had no right to talk about my body the way that he did, and that all he does is objectify me. He started laughing and said, "Wow, those are big words." And that when we met, he thought that I was in better shape. But my clothes obviously tricked him. I'm 5'4" and I weigh 130 pounds. I am by no means fat, but the way that he was bullying me was making me think that I was. That's when I told him that he was the fat one, and that he had a big, huge beer belly. I also told him that his face was super round, but that didn't bother me. Oh yeah, and that his hairy back was gross. Then he said, "Wow, I can't believe you're attacking my physical appearance." Then he stormed out of my apartment, and as soon as he left, I felt happy. We haven't spoken in 4 days. I'm afraid that if he asks me to get back with him, I will. But I should just break up with him, right? What should I do? Story time about how my boyfriend tried to cheat on me with my fake Instagram account, not knowing it was really me. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. The funny thing is that when my boyfriend and I got together, I did not want the relationship. He begged me for 6 months to be his girlfriend. And you see, the only reason why I didn't want to was because I knew that he was a player. Every single one of my friends had basically gone out with him. I was just the last girl in the group to go out with him because I always kept saying no. And looking back, he was definitely obsessed with me because I never gave in to him. I was the girl that he couldn't have. During those 6 months, he would hit me up on Instagram every single day. Anytime I posted a story, he would automatically reply to it. He would like and comment on all of my pictures. We also had a lot of mutual friends, so we would end up at the same events and parties. And every time that he would see me in public, he would zero in on me. He would basically ignore all the other girls at the party and make me feel like I was the only one there. And he would constantly compliment me and tell me how beautiful I was, how attracted to me he was, how I was just so different from all the other girls that he had gone out with. Trust me, I knew that he was love bombing me, but eventually after 6 months, I was like, he's gotta be honest. So I decided to give him a chance. And let me tell you, he has been the perfect boyfriend. He's so sweet and considerate. My parents absolutely adore him, and my mom never likes anybody. See, I come from a Latino family. One day I decided to make a second Instagram account. It was just an inspiration account. I posted cute outfits of other people I liked, makeup, nails. Till one day I see my boyfriend in my DMs. Part 2 is of how my boyfriend tried to cheat on me with my fake Instagram and not knowing it was actually me. Disclaimers did on my Storytime was sending me on Instagram. That's when I opened up my account to see that my boyfriend had DM'd me. First I thought he was joking. When I clicked into the message and I read it, my heart and my stomach sank. He was taking a shot. He thought that I was some sort of influencer. Now when I created the second account, I was already with him. But I really didn't tell him that I was creating it. It was just for fun for myself. I did start gaining followers. I did put in a lot of work into this account, but it was pretty much a visual diary just for me. It just so happens that other girls liked the aesthetic and I started gaining a lot of followers. I had about 10,000. But here's my theory. Since my account is probably listed to be in the area that he is, probably popped up on one of his mutual lists or his explore page or something like that, because I was trying to figure out how he found the account. The message read, "Hey beautiful, I really love your pictures and love your style. I'm also really into fashion. Lol, no he's not. And I would love to take you out on a date. I know all the good spots around the city. Let me know if you're down." So when I clicked on my boyfriend's profile and realized that he had hidden all of the pictures we had together. So if he had DM'd any girl and she went to look at his profile, she would automatically assume that he's single because he doesn't have a picture of another girl. Instead of freaking out and calling him, I decided to keep cool. Instead, I called my mom. She told me to play along with the conversation. So that's what I did. Messaged him back and said, "Wow, I really love your pictures and your style too. What's your favorite designer?" He replied, "Louis Vuitton." Ew. By the end of the conversation, we had a date for that night. And I showed up. Part 3 is up. I told him about how my boyfriend tried to cheat on me with my fake Instagram account, not knowing it was me. Disclaimer is not my story time, was sending me on Instagram. At the end of the conversation he thought he was having with some other girl, we had decided to go on a date. And like I said, I was playing along, so I was super nice to him. I complimented all the clothes that he wore. I told him that he looked so attractive in his pictures and that I was really looking forward to meeting him. He chose a restaurant downtown. And of course he did, because I live nowhere near that area. In fact, he and I never go out on dates there. So he knew that he wouldn't see anybody he knew. Here's where it gets actually really funny. This man sent a picture of the outfit he wanted to wear. Brown fedora with the Louis Vuitton monogram on it, a Louis Vuitton belt, black pants, and a black shirt. So I replied saying, "That's perfect. I'll wear a black dress and my favorite Louis Vuitton purse." But I was still heartbroken. Here's what I did. I asked my mom to come with me to the restaurant. Her and I did our makeup, our hair, and we got dressed up really, really nice. And I decided to wear a black dress. My mom actually happened to have an old Louis Vuitton purse in her closet that she never wore, so I grabbed it. My mom and I show up to the restaurant and my boyfriend is already there. So I decided to walk in and turn around, so that way he could only see my back. My mom decided to stay outside of the restaurant, but she knew to come in as soon as he saw me. I suddenly feel a tap on my shoulder and that's when I turn around. He says, "Oh, hey babe, what are you doing here?" The look on this man's face was of pure fear. That's when I hand him my phone so that he could see that the account that he was messaging was actually mine. That's when he says, "You lied to me?" He was mad at me for pretending to be somebody else. Then he started apologizing, and then he said that he knew the whole time and that he was just joking around. I broke up with him and haven't spoken to him since. Story time about how I got my sister's boyfriend to fall in love with me, and I do not regret it. Disclaimers are not my story time. Send me on Instagram. My sister and I have always been rivals since we were kids. I'm 22 and she's 24. We were always super close in age, which means we competed for everything, including our parents' attention, clothes and makeup, and somehow we always ended up liking the same boys. When I turned 16, she was going away for college, and I actually started to appreciate her a lot more. We started calling each other every single day, and I realized that I really missed my sister. We actually got closer living further away than together. My parents were also really happy with this because her and I would not get along when she lived at home. One weekend I decided to go stay with her on her campus, and that's when things got interesting. My sister was living it up. She was partying all the time. I told her that I didn't really like that she was partying so much. I told her that I didn't feel comfortable with her passing out at random guys' places. She told me that I was overreacting and not to tell my parents. But I got home and told my parents everything. This is when our relationship became bad once again. After this, my sister didn't trust me, and basically she became my enemy. She started criticizing everything about me, the clothes that I'd wear, so I had to distance myself from her. My parents wanted her to move back in with us because she wasn't doing well in school. She was clearly partying instead of studying. Of course, my sister refused to move back home, so my parents basically cut her off. I got a new boyfriend at this time, and my sister would flirt with him anytime she came home. I even caught them hugging one time. Part 2 is that Storytime about how I stole my sister's boyfriend and don't regret it. Disclaimers in my storytime instead of me on Instagram. When I walked in on my boyfriend and my sister hugging, I knew I had to do something. I went straight to my parents and told them what she was doing. My dad pulled her into her room and talked to her, but she totally denied everything. She said that she was not flirting with my boyfriend, but we all knew that was a lie. Even my boyfriend was honest with me and told me that she had been flirting with him openly. That's when my boyfriend told me he didn't even want to come over to our house because my sister made him that uncomfortable. And when I told my parents this, they felt so embarrassed. They called my boyfriend and personally apologized to him. He was actually so sweet though. He would come visit me to my house and we would just chill out in his car while my sister was inside watching us through the window. Yeah, she was crazy. He and I eventually broke up because he went off to live in another country. And guess what? My sister said that she knew he never loved me and that's why he left me. She was being so mean at the time. A few years later, she started dating someone. Of course, at the time, it never occurred to me to even flirt with him or act the way that she did with my boyfriend. You see, I'm above all that. But as soon as I got a new boyfriend, she would start flirting with him. And she had no shame about it. This became a running problem in my family. My parents would ask her to leave me alone and my boyfriends, and she would say that she did. But no, she didn't. Oh yeah, and her boyfriend broke up with her because he noticed that she would flirt with a lot of guys. Apparently, she did it even in front of him. So when she finally got a new boyfriend, I decided that I was gonna do the same thing to her. I started flirting with her boyfriend a little. Not a lot, but I definitely made sure to tell him I thought he was attractive. After a few weeks, he started saying things back to me, and I knew that it was working. I never did it in front of my sisters and my parents because I didn't want them to get mad at me. So instead, I got her boyfriend to basically fall in love with me. I already knew everything about him because my sister would tell me, so I just started telling him I liked the same things he did. It got to the point where one day he kissed me and I didn't tell my parents. I made sure to get his hopes up. Part 3 is up. I got my sister's boyfriend to fall in love with me, her life turned to misery. No, I didn't regret it. Disclaimers is not my story time was sent to me on Instagram. One day I went up to my sister and told her that her boyfriend had kissed me. First she thought I was making it up to make her jealous. Told me I could never compete with her and that she was the more beautiful sister out of the two of us. Which is wrong. So I handed her my phone so that she could see all the messages that her boyfriend and I had been sending each other. And that's when she lost it. She started wailing on me. She started slapping and kicking me. My parents ran into her room and asked her what was wrong. I told my parents that I treated my sister the way she treated me. She would always go after my boyfriends, flirt with them, and try to get them to break up with me. Of course, my parents didn't agree with me, so they were really angry. They separated us, but my sister went crazy. She called her boyfriend and told him to come over. Obviously, he didn't know that she already knew at the time. And when he came over, she started beating him up. He grabbed a pan from the kitchen and started swinging at him. She actually ended up giving him a concussion. After that, she begged for his forgiveness, but he still broke up with her. At the end of the day, he ended up leaving her. She was so stupid for begging him to stay with her. Her boyfriend even asked me if we could be together, and I told him no. I told him that the whole time I had just been playing him just to get back at my sister, which I know is so cruel, but he deserved it. After that, my sister and I decided to make peace. She told me that she wouldn't mess with my boyfriends anymore and that she would stop being evil. But after a month of having my new boyfriend, I found her flirting with him too. I told her if she didn't stop that I would make her life miserable once again. I'm pretty sure she has a boyfriend, but she doesn't want to tell my family. Cause she knows that I'll go after him and I would probably end up making him fall in love with me too. But at this point, I just don't know what to do. What should I do? She's so evil and I want to make her life miserable. Bye. Story time about how I became an IG model / escort for billionaires. Tell you that last month I made $60,000. This clearly is not my story time and send me on Instagram. So at the beginning I had to lie about my age. I'm really 36 years old, but I say I'm 22. I do look a lot younger than I am, and of course I get filler and Botox. I started my Instagram account 6 years ago. My inspirations were Anna Cherie, Amanda Lee, I am JoJo, and Abigail Ratchford. I mean Abigail Ratchet. I basically copied all of these girls' pictures. Within a month of starting my Instagram account, I had 10,000 followers. And yes, all of them were males. But I didn't really start making money until 2018. You know, like every other girl on Instagram, I signed up for OF. And that's when I started making serious money. But I was also making money from Instagram. Brands would send me clothes and watches and protein powder, stuff like that. Eventually, I became an ambassador for one of the biggest Instagram clothing stores. I think we all know what I'm talking about. Fashion Hova, and I started making a lot of money then. So I basically started living above my means. I got myself a new apartment in Beverly Hills, and it was $6,000 a month. I also got myself a Mercedes, and I would exclusively shop at Air One. I would also go shopping at Rodeo Drive almost every day because I wanted the paparazzi to get pictures of me. And I even called the paparazzi on me a few times, so I had to pay them like $2,000 out of pocket. So yeah, I was spending a lot of money. Whatever money I got that month, I would literally spend it by the end. One month I spent $25,000 going out with friends. I would usually pick up the bill. This is what started getting me into trouble. Part 2 is Story time about how I became an IG model / escort for billionaires. After I spent the $25,000 in 1 month, I decided I needed another income source. So I thought of escorting. One of my very good friends in LA was also an escort, and she told me about it, but I was like, I can't do that. But one day I called her and she told me everything. She gets contacted through Instagram by very, very rich men, like billionaires. I honestly didn't believe her at first, but then she showed me receipts. Her bank account had more than $1 million in it. She told me that she had only been doing it for 6 months. She put me in contact with several people and they had to verify a bunch of my stuff. But then after a week, I was finally in. I was really scared. I had to go get my passport renewed. This meant that I was going to be traveling internationally with men that I didn't know. A few days later, I get a message on Instagram from an account. The guy that owned this account was clearly very rich. It wasn't him contacting me, it was his assistant. He got my information and 2 days later, I was on a private plane. I landed in a foreign country and I spent the entire weekend with this guy. He didn't speak English. Basically took me around his city and showed me off for his friends. I honestly didn't feel uncomfortable at any point and he didn't try anything. In fact, he was actually super shy, but his friends on the other hand were really handsy. Part 3 is up. Storytime about how I became an Instagram model / escort for billionaires. That's when his friends started getting really handsy. We were in a really expensive high-rise and the apartment was literally worth millions. And I knew that all of these guys were used to getting whatever they wanted. One of the friends actually grabbed my arm and told me to sit on his lap, but I told him I couldn't. He wasn't the one that hired me to be there, so I had to go straight to the guy that hired me. I told him that his friends were making me uncomfortable and he said, okay, we should leave then. I was actually shocked that he listened to what I wanted. Now one of my regular clients and I travel with him almost every 2 months. So let me tell you how much he paid me. For the 3-day weekend, I ended up with $50,000. Yep, that's right. But let me tell you a little about the dark side of this. A few jobs later, I ended up with somebody who was completely crazy. I ended up going to Vegas with this guy. He was approximately 10 years younger than me and was filthy rich. But he was also a complete psycho. He bought me this whole outfit that he wanted me to wear the entire night. Told him I was more comfortable in my clothes. I was wearing a Fendi dress. It looked great. That's when he said, no, you're gonna wear this. I ended up walking around Vegas in a micro mini skirt and a bikini top. By the end of this night, he was getting really aggressive. I tried to stay quiet, hoping that he would just forget that I was in his car. Suddenly, he turned to look at me and wanted me to do something. When I said no, he grabbed me by the hair and told me that he owned me for the night. Then he said, I'll add an extra $20,000 in there for you. And it does get worse. But now I learned to save my money. I no longer pay for my friends' drinks and food. I still have my $6,000 apartment and I upgraded my car. I live like a princess. I also bought my parents a house though. It was definitely one of the happiest days of my life. And believe it or not, I actually did end up finding love. My boyfriend is okay with my job, but he just asked me to be safe. Of course, he asked me every day to quit because he wants to support me, but he can't give me the life I've given myself. What should I do? Storytime about how I found my husband's secret phone. Disclaimer's not my storytime, it's sent me on Instagram. I found 5 dating apps and 2 secret girlfriends on his phone. And I can't even begin to tell you what I found on Instagram. Up until this point, my husband and I had the utmost respect and trust for each other. I never once thought he was capable of doing this. Literally every woman says that when they find out their man is cheating. Around 6 months ago, my husband started a new job. He's in tech and makes a lot of money, so I've been able to stay at home with our kids. We now have 2 kids and they're both 2 and 5. Our life is amazing. Our parents live near us. We always make time for each other and go out on dates. We even take solo trips on the weekends. Last year we went to Bali for 2 weeks. My point is we always make time for each other. When he started his new job, he started earning more money. But this also meant that he took on a lot more work. He was always so stressed out. My husband and I met in college and we studied the exact same thing. We both worked for the same company. Eventually I retired to take care of our kids. So when he got his new job, I offered to help him out with his work. He was actually really grateful for this and we were both doing a really good job. He was working from home 3 days out of the week. So it was a great situation. We were spending time together, working together, and the kids were spending more time with their dad. His new job gave him a new cell phone. And this is the cell phone that I would usually use to help him out with his work and his laptop. Part 2 is up. Storytime about how I found my husband's secret cell phone, his 2 girlfriends, and his 5 dating apps. Disclaimers is not my story time, it's sent me on Instagram. I started using his work cell phone to help him out with his job, and he kept his own cell phone. This is when I started noticing that he would make a big deal about losing his phone. Anytime he would misplace it, he would go absolutely berserk. Now, I thought it was just because he was stressed about work, till I realized it wasn't stress. He forgot to silence his phone one night, and the notifications were going off. I woke him up and asked him to turn it off. My mind did not go to him cheating. I thought it was work-related stuff. Then I realized it was his personal phone that was going off, not his work phone. The next day, he apologized for having his work notifications on, and I said, but it wasn't your work phone, it was your personal phone. And he said, no, it wasn't. And I said, yes, it was. And that's when he accused me of being paranoid and crazy. And that's when I knew he was cheating. I had to keep it cool though. I was feeding the kids in the kitchen when this all happened. On this day, he was gonna go to work. I knew that he was gonna take his personal and his work phone with him to the office. So what I did was change the phone covers on each phone and flip them upside down. He grabbed the work phone thinking it was his personal phone. He put it in his pocket and went to the bathroom. And he left his work phone, which was his personal phone, on the countertop. I told him that maybe I should keep it just in case I needed to answer emails, and he said yes. He left and I had his phone all to myself. As soon as I opened his personal phone, I went straight to the messages and I found his 2 girlfriends, Laura and Missy. Part 3 is Storytime about how I found my husband's secret phone, his 2 girlfriends, and his 5 dating apps. Disclaimers are not my storytime, it's sent me on Instagram. I started reading through the text messages between his 2 girlfriends. I scrolled and scrolled and scrolled. He had been together with the first girl for 2 months and the second girl just for 3 weeks. And in the messages, he was totally bad-mouthing me. He was telling them that I was crazy and abusive, and that's how he justified his cheating to them. I also read in some of the messages that he was complaining about our kids, how spoiled and ungrateful my kids were, and that's why he wanted to escape the house to be with them. Let me tell you, our kids are so considerate and so loving towards towards us. They're very affectionate children, and they never get upset at their dad whenever he has to go to work. So for him to be talking badly about our children just made everything 10 times worse. After reading the messages for about 2 or 3 minutes, I went to the bathroom and vomited. I was physically ill. His messages were so perverted too. I know that when you start a new relationship, you're always trying to impress people, but he just took it too far. After I vomited, I went back to his phone and kept reading the messages. This is when I found out that he was paying both of these girls rents. So the whole time I'm helping him with his job to earn money for our family, half of that was going to these women. I got sick again. After I calmed down for a few minutes, I went back to his phone. Then I found his dating apps. His dating profile was so disgusting too. He was all about fitness and mental health. He also claimed that he was single in his dating profiles. So on top of him cheating on me, he was cheating on his 2 girlfriends. This time I didn't bother reading all the messages he had in the dating apps, but I did notice that he was going on dates with multiple girls several times a week. Later on, I found out that the whole work situation was a lie. He was working from home the entire time, but going on dates. I took screenshots of everything and went straight to my lawyer. I filed for divorce that very same day. When my husband came home, I confronted him and he denied everything. Even with all the proof, he's still denying it. He's not speaking to our children, and you better believe I'm getting half of all his money. Bye. Story time about the day my husband attacked me and put me in the hospital. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, instead of me on Instagram. My husband and I had been married for 7 years. 3 years into the marriage, he started sleeping on the couch. We would constantly fight back then because of several things. Number 1, I knew he was cheating on me, but he would never admit to it. Number 2, I wanted to have children, but he didn't want to at the time. Number 3, he never wanted to spend time with me and always prioritized his friends. And this was around the time that he started getting physically violent. Because we'd already been married for a few years at that point, I never saw him as a violent person. It all started by him shoving me one time during an argument. But he shoved me so hard I fell to the ground and ended up bruising my chin. And even though this was a big problem between me and him, it became an even bigger problem between me and my family. As soon as my parents saw the bruise, they started accusing him of beating me. And of course, my first instinct was to defend my husband. My parents begged me to stay with them and I didn't. I went back to my husband and demanded an apology, but he wouldn't even look me in the face. He told me he basically did not care. Once he started sleeping on the couch, it was just like we were roommates. We stayed like this for years. Anytime we got into an argument, he would just look for something to throw at me. One day he threw a jewelry box at me and I ended up in the ER. And of course, the hospital thought it was my husband. So I lied and said that I tripped. And unfortunately, I went straight back to my husband. Part 2 is up. Tell me about the day my husband attacked me and put me in the hospital. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, instead of me on Instagram. After years of him pushing me, shoving me, throwing things at me, and even slapping me, I became so numb to it. It would get me really angry and upset at the moment, but as soon as he would apologize, we would just go back to normal. But even our normal wasn't normal. We didn't sleep in the same bed. He was never really home, and when he was always playing video games. This was also around the time that he lost his job, so for 5 years, I was basically the breadwinner. He told me he didn't want to get a job and he wanted to play video games. I didn't tell him anything because I didn't want it to turn into a fight, but I was angry at the thought that I had to now support him. But like I said, my parents did not like him at all. They knew something was up because I always had some sort of bruise. My parents made it a habit of showing up unannounced to our house. I was actually really grateful to my parents. This didn't upset me at all. But my husband, on the other hand, hated my parents. One day he asked me, why do they even care about you so much? You're not that important. Around a year ago, I started feeling really sick all the time. At the time, I didn't know why. One day, I walk into the kitchen and see my husband holding eye drops in his hand, but he quickly put it away. I asked him why he was holding them, and he said nothing, mind your own business. So I did. A few months later, I'm having a conversation with a coworker, and he told me a story about somebody using eye drops on someone else to make them sick. This is when it all clicked. I had all these weird stomach issues, and I never realized that it was him putting eye drops in my coffee. This is when I decided to file for divorce. Instead of filing for divorce and leaving him, I went home and told him that I was going to get a divorce. He grabbed a hammer and started chasing me. I locked myself in the bathroom. Part 3 is up. Tell me about the day my husband attacked me and put me in the hospital. Disclaimer, is not my story time, instead of me on Instagram. When I saw him grab the hammer, I started instantly running. I ran straight to the bathroom and locked myself. The good thing is that he would never damage this house because he does love it, so he didn't swing at the door. I stayed in the bathroom for an hour explaining to him why I wanted to get a divorce. After the 2 hours, I thought he had calmed down. He basically told me that he would give me the divorce with no problem. But let me remind you, I was the breadwinner and he had no job. He was completely dependent on me. But as soon as I opened the door, he pushed in and started hitting me. Unfortunately, I didn't tell anyone in my family what my plan was. Suddenly, I wake up and I realize I'm on the ground. 4 hours had passed. I get up and look at myself in the mirror, and my face was completely swollen. I walk into the living room and my husband was there playing video games, just like he did every day all day. As soon as he sees me, he says, "You better go wash your face." Instead, I grabbed my things and ran out. He didn't even bother chasing me. I called my parents on the way to the hospital and they met me there. Luckily, there was no major damage. My parents helped me file a police report, and when the police showed up to see my husband, he had cleaned the bathroom. Guess what he told them? That he was the one that wanted to divorce me because I was crazy, and that I had made up the whole attack. He says that I must have hit myself in the face. That's when the cops asked him, "How do you know that she was hit in the face?" Gotcha. He said he had assumed that I was being hit in the face. My brothers and parents went over and kicked him out. I sold the place and bought a house down the street from my parents. I am now so much happier. Feel like I'm aging backwards from not being around him. The constant feel and nervousness I felt around him took a toll on me, and I just hadn't realized it. To this day, he says he did nothing, and the cops have done nothing against him. I need proof, so what should I do? Mother-in-law is so terrible that I'm considering breaking up with my boyfriend. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. My mother-in-law has done everything in her power to separate my boyfriend and I. And though she doesn't admit it, she loves it. When my boyfriend and I started dating, we were both really happy, really loving and affectionate. We love to spend time with each other, so our relationship is really well-rounded. In fact, my boyfriend comes to my apartment every single day. Without me asking him, he always just wants to spend time with me. After 3 weeks of dating, we decided we'd meet each other's parents. Even though he was incredibly nervous to meet my parents, they went out of their way to make him feel at home. My parents had invited us over for dinner, and they literally made his favorite foods and even bought his favorite dessert. Needless to say, my parents loved him and he loved my parents. The following week, we met his parents. It went okay, I guess. His parents wanted to take us out to dinner, which was nice. His dad was super charismatic, funny, and made a lot of conversation. His mom hugged me and kissed me, so I thought she was okay. But throughout the dinner, she would kind of look at me and not really say anything. Basically, she only responded when my boyfriend talked. Obviously, I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, so I didn't tell my boyfriend anything. Next day, I get a text message from my mother-in-law. She asked me to have lunch with her. Just the two of us. Part 2 is up. Mother-in-law is so terrible that I'm considering breaking up with my boyfriend. Disclaimer, it's not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. She asked me out to have lunch by ourselves. I said yes. During the lunch, she took me to this really fancy restaurant, and she did not tell me that it was so fancy. So I showed up in jeans and a cardigan. As soon as she sees me, she says, "Oh, why didn't you wear a dress?" I told her I didn't realize the restaurant was so fancy, and I apologized. She said it was okay and for me to sit down quickly. By the way, my boyfriend's family has a lot of money, so she's accustomed to the, nicer things in life. Not so bad sitting in that restaurant with my cheap jeans and my cardigan, while everyone else was in dresses and beautiful sandals. We made small talk and it was actually kind of nice. After we ordered, she started asking me questions though. She started asking me how many boyfriends I'd had in the past, what my friends were like, and she even asked me how much money I earned per year. She was clearly trying to find out if I was only interested in her son's money, which no, I'm not. Then she asked me if I wanted to have kids. I mean, this isn't even a conversation that I've had with my boyfriend yet, so to have it with his mom felt just strange. I told her in the future I definitely wanted to have kids, but not anytime soon. That's when she said that's such a shame. I want grandchildren within 2 years. I laughed and told her that her son and I hadn't even spoken about marriage. We hadn't been together very long. When the bill came, of course I offered to pay for it, but she said, "No, darling, that's okay." But when she looked at the bill, she said, "Wow, that's a lot." Mind you, she was the one ordering the expensive drinks. An hour later, I got a text message from my boyfriend. He said his mom came home crying after having lunch with me. She told him that I was rude to her, that I didn't offer to pay. Part 3. Mother-in-law is so terrible that I want to break up with my boyfriend. Disclaimer, is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. That's when my boyfriend told me that his mom came home crying after she had lunch with me. She said that I didn't offer to pay for the bill and that I was rude to her. Of course, I quickly defended myself and told him that never happened. I did offer to pay for the bill. He told me that I needed to give her some time. So a few days later, I went to their house and apologized to her personally. I told her that I was sorry if I had done anything to offend her. She told me that I just needed to be a little more sensitive. So after that, I did not speak to her at all. But she noticed every time I would go over to their house, she would make comments about my clothes, my hair. On one occasion, she hugged me and grabbed my arm. That's when she said, "Wow, from far away it looks like you're thin, but you don't feel very thin." I laughed hysterically. Obviously she wanted to hurt my feelings, but I just thought it was funny. One occasion she brought up my boyfriend's ex, only to insinuate that I wasn't as pretty as her. I laughed at her comment and didn't say anything. She once came over to my boyfriend's apartment while I was cooking and literally proceeded to take over and judge everything that I was doing. She told me that my food was too plain and that she felt bad for my boyfriend, and that obviously he had lost weight because of how terrible my food was. The last straw was when she told my boyfriend that I was talking to somebody on the phone. I told my boyfriend I was talking to my mom, and she told him that she thought it was a man. I know it's not my boyfriend's fault, but he always sides with her. I'm always at a loss. What should I do? My mother-in-law is so terrible that I'm considering breaking up with my boyfriend. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. My mother-in-law has done everything in her power to separate my boyfriend and I. And though she doesn't admit it, she loves it. When my boyfriend and I started dating, we were both really happy, really loving and affectionate. We love to spend time with each other, so our relationship is really well-rounded. In fact, my boyfriend comes to my apartment every single day. Without me asking him, he always just wants to spend time with me. After 3 weeks of dating, we decided we'd meet each other's parents. Even though he was incredibly nervous to meet my parents, they went out of their way to make him feel at home. My parents had invited us over for dinner, and they literally made his favorite foods and even bought his favorite dessert. Needless to say, my parents loved him and he loved my parents. The following week, we met his parents. It went okay, I guess. His parents wanted to take us out to dinner, which was nice. His dad was super charismatic, funny, and made a lot of conversation. His mom hugged me and kissed me, so I thought she was okay. But throughout the dinner, she would kind of look at me and not really say anything. Basically, she only responded when my boyfriend talked. Obviously, I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, so I didn't tell my boyfriend anything. Next day, I get a text message from my mother-in-law. She asked me to have lunch with her. Just the two of us. Part 2 is up. Boyfriend confessed to me that he's attracted to my best friend. Should I leave him? Disclaimers not my story time. Send me an Instagram. I know you guys are gonna all say yes immediately, but hear me out. My boyfriend and I have been dating for 6 months. My best friend and I actually met him at a bar. That night, I never expected that he would ever come after me. I consider my best friend the prettier of the two of us, so I'm used to her getting hit on instead of me. But that night, my boyfriend came to me. He talked to me pretty much the entire night, and my best friend told me to go for it. So I did. He and I spent the night together, and after that, we were inseparable. To the point where he wanted me to move in with him after 2 months. My parents thought I was absolutely crazy and they didn't want me to move in with him, but I did anyway. I come from a Latino family, so this was absolutely reprehensible. I went against my family's wishes and they actually stopped speaking to me for a little bit, but luckily I got them back. My boyfriend during that time gave me all his support. He told me that my family would come around eventually and that they would see that we were in love. So living together was the logical next step. After 3 months of living together, I knew that I wanted to marry him, and he would talk about marriage all the time. He asked me what kind of ring I would want and what I would want for the proposal. We even started talking about our honeymoon. I was also starting to get in the best shape of my life. I was looking super snatched. My boyfriend told me that he loved the way that I look, but that he didn't want me to get skinny. Again, I just felt like he was supporting me and loving me. Around this time, my best friend started dating somebody. After a few weeks, they got really serious about the relationship. And of course, we went on double dates. After the third double date, I noticed that my boyfriend was getting a little annoyed. I got the feeling he was jealous of my best friend's boyfriend. Follow for part 2. Boyfriend confessed to me that he's attracted to my best friend. Should I leave him? Disclaimers not my story time. Send me an Instagram. I asked him if he was jealous of my best friend's boyfriend, and that's when he said no. But every time we would go on double dates, he would get in such a bad mood. 3 weeks ago, my best friend told me that she was moving in with her boyfriend. And when I told my boyfriend that they were moving in, his face almost went green. I asked him what was wrong and he said nothing. After that, he went into the bathroom and didn't come out for 40 minutes. Again, I asked him if he was okay and he said yeah. And I sat him down and asked him to be honest with me. That's when he said, I'm attracted to your best friend. Instantly started to cry because I had already been suspecting it. He explained to me that he didn't have any feelings for her until she got a boyfriend, and that he felt that he had some sort of ownership over her. Before my best friend got a boyfriend, the three of us would hang out a lot. And not once then did I ever get a feeling that he was attracted to her. He told me that he would never act on his feelings, but he didn't want to go on any more double dates. I asked him if he wanted to be with her instead of me, and he said absolutely not. He said that I was the love of his life and that attraction only meant attraction, that he didn't have feelings for her. A few days later, he took me to the most expensive restaurant in our city and asked me to marry him. But I didn't know what to say. I can't stop thinking that he's attracted to my best friend. Part 3 is up. Boyfriend confessed to me that he's attracted to my best friend. What should I do? Disclaimer is not my story time. Sending me on Instagram. After he proposed, I told him I didn't know what to say. He told me to think it over. I finally decided to tell my best friend what my boyfriend had told me. But he had confessed that he was attracted to her. First, she laughed. I told her no. I'm serious. He confessed that he's attracted to you. That's when she told me I needed to break up with him. That's when I told her that he had also proposed. And she said, well, then you really need to break up with him now. That's when she told me that she didn't want me to resent her and that it was completely out of her control. And I didn't. I promised her that I would never resent her for my boyfriend being attracted to her. It's not like she ever did anything on purpose to make him feel attracted. She also told me that marrying him right now would be rushing into it, and she's kind of right. We've only really known each other for 6 months. Then she told me that she's never gotten the feeling that he's attracted to her. She's never caught him looking at her or anything like that. So now her theory is that he's looking for an easy way out, and that he probably wants me to break up with him. But my boyfriend is still sweet and super affectionate. He's constantly showering me with love. My best friend thinks that if I stay with him, our relationship will suffer. I've known my best friend longer. What should I do? Time about how my fiance is refusing to help me plan our wedding. Should I leave him? Disclaimer is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. I'm so sad about the palette. My fiance and I met a few years ago through friends. When we first met each other, I had a really bad first impression of him. First off, he was completely up himself. All he did was talk about himself and never once asked me questions. We were surrounded by other people, so I gave him the benefit of the doubt when he asked me out. I said yes, but our first date was kind of the same. He only really talked about himself, his career, the things he likes to do, his favorite foods, his family, his dog. I eventually just started volunteering information because he wouldn't really ask me. After our date, I didn't speak to him for a full 2 weeks. I was really turned off by his attitude, but then he messaged me saying that he was really nervous and that he realizes that he probably could have been a little more talkative. I said, yeah, you could have been. I told him how I really felt and he did apologize and he asked me out to dinner again. This time I invited him to my apartment and he made us a full 4-course meal. By the way, he's a chef. Obviously, that night, I completely fell in love with him. He made all of my favorite foods, but the gourmet version. A few months later, we became boyfriend and girlfriend. There were still a few things that I didn't like about him, though. Like, he never really had anything to talk about other than himself. Exactly a year after we met, he decided to propose, and I said yes. But when I asked him to do things for the wedding, he says no. Part 2 is up. Story time about how my fiance is refusing to help me plan our wedding. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I said I'm on Instagram. To be honest, when he asked me to marry him, I was totally blindsided. Honestly, felt like our relationship was starting to get stale. So when he asked me to marry him, I was like, for real? He told me that I was the first person who ever made him feel important. And looking back, I realized that it's because he only talked about himself and I really let him talk about only himself. Anyway, I immediately said yes out of the excitement. But when I called my mom to tell her, I was actually crying, which is like, okay, maybe I shouldn't marry him then. A few weeks into our engagement, we hadn't talked about planning planning at all. So I decided to ask him, like, what do you want the wedding to be like? That's when he told me that he didn't really care, but that he would just give me money for it. I mean, on one hand, that makes me really happy because I don't want my parents to have to pay for the wedding, and he has a lot of money. But on the other hand, I want him to be involved, especially for the food because he's a chef. I decided to hire a wedding planner because my job is extremely busy. I work in marketing. Asked him to go to a few meetings with me. He said no. When I finally found the perfect wedding planner, I asked my fiance if we could go have lunch with him, and he said no. This is when I blew up in his face. I asked him why he wasn't participating at all. That's when he told me that he was too busy at the restaurant, that he didn't have time to do anything with the wedding. I was like, okay, fine. When it came time to choosing the caterers, I demanded that he go with me. He told me that he would try to get off work, but he never did. Every time I tried to schedule it, he would say that he was busy with work. That's when I told him that his restaurant, which is super fancy, should just cater the whole wedding, and he said no. He told me they were way too busy and ready to get a Michelin star, so there was absolutely no way they could cater his wedding. That's when he said, you can handle it, I trust you. I went home and cried the entire night. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my fiance refuses to help me plan our wedding. Disclaimers on my story time is sending me on Instagram. After I got home and cried, he came home and asked me what was wrong. That's when I told him that he didn't seem excited about the wedding, and that leaving all the planning to me made me feel like I was his employee, as if I had nothing better to do, which I do have my career just like he has his. Not to mention the fact that me picking everything I want for our wedding makes it feel like it's my wedding and not ours. He told me that I was overreacting. He also said that he was excited for the wedding, but that he was too tired and too busy to even think about it. That's when I told him that I was really busy and I was really tired too. And he begrudgingly told me that he would carve out some time this week so that we could speak to some of the caterers. I told the wedding planner and he started setting up some meetings. But of course, my fiance canceled on the first 2. He did show up to the 3rd one, but all he did was criticize the food. Then we went cake tasting. I expected this to be fun. When my friends have had cake tastings for their wedding, they always have so much fun. As soon as we showed up to the cake shop, he asked me, where did you find this? That's when I told him that our planner had found it. He said it looked like a supermarket bakery. That's when I told him that I don't mind supermarket bakeries and that it was probably just as good as a French bakery. He laughed and said, wow, you're funny, babe. We tasted the cakes and he actually liked them. Thank God. But then he requested to go to more cake tastings. We ended up going to 5 other places. This was already too much for me. I got a new account at work and I'm still trying to lose weight for the wedding. So him making me run around trying to taste cake is like the straw that broke the camel's back. After 2 weeks, we finally decided on a cake flavor. Most people must have fun planning their weddings, right? But I just feel like I'm drowning. I have to make all the important decisions on my own. I decided to involve my mom and sister and they've helped me so much. Of course, the wedding planner is helping me too, but ultimately the decisions have to be made by me. He hasn't made any effort to help me with anything else. I kind of want to break up with him, but I feel like this isn't a big enough reason to break up with him. What should I do? Secretly hate my husband, but I can't leave him. Disclaimers in my story time on Instagram. My husband and I have only been married for 2 months. We dated on and off for almost 7 years. So when he finally proposed, I was actually really happy. The problem is that we never lived together before we got married. He never wanted to move in with me when we were dating. He also had this thing where he wouldn't want me to come to his apartment randomly. He would always schedule times where I could hang out with him at his apartment. This all seems suspicious, but I really wanted to marry him, so I just decided to overlook those things. But now that we're married, I see why he didn't want me to come over and why he had all these strange rules. It turns out that he's incredibly messy, lazy, and is super picky about the food he eats. So now that I'm his wife, I'm constantly having to clean up after him. Every single time he goes to the toilet, he always leaves skid marks, or for some reason, he always has like explosive poop and it goes everywhere on the bowl. So every single time I go to the bathroom after he does, I'm always having to clean it up. And it makes me so angry that I have to clean up after him that I have begun to hate him. Also, he's super picky about his food. We can never go to restaurants because he never wants anything on the menu. And if we ever do go to a restaurant, we have to go wherever he wants. I love all types of cuisine, especially Indian, Mediterranean, Japanese, but he thinks it's gross. He comes from a very American family. He grew up eating chicken nuggets and grilled cheeses. To him, anything with some spice is way too much. That means I can't cook what I want because he always complains about the smell. Thankfully, he's got an office that's 30 minutes away. So when he leaves, that's when I cook. But I have to make sure to air out the apartment before he gets home. I'm always doing his laundry and cleaning up after him. Every single time he shaves, he leaves hair everywhere. I actually hate this man now. I told him that I don't want to live with him anymore, but he freaked out. He's begging for me to stay, but I'm so unhappy. What should I do? Am I the asshole for cutting off my jealous mom? Disclaimers on my story time instead of me on Instagram. Then she somehow managed to get jealous that my dad and I were getting along super well. She called my dad while my dad was visiting me and threw a tantrum about how she needed him to go home. So my dad cut his trip short just to go be with my insecure mother. After that, I really didn't speak to my mom for about 2 months. I couldn't believe that she always managed to make me feel less than. And somehow she always made everything about her. I reached out to my brothers and asked them if they ever felt the same about my mom, and they said no. My mom was totally different with them. She took care of them and doted on them. Probably because they're boys and not me, because I'm a girl. One day I decided to call my grandmother and I told her everything. That's when my grandma told me that my mom has always been that way and that I just shouldn't take it personally. Apparently when my mom was growing up, she did not have any girlfriends. She always liked staying away from other women to not have any competition. But I told my grandma that she's my mom and that she shouldn't see me as competition. Grandma suspects that something is wrong with my mom, so, I don't know if she's bipolar or something, but obviously I can't diagnose her. Thankfully, I have other women in my life, my grandma and 2 of my aunts. They act like my moms more than my own mother. When I graduated college, I was actually engaged. My fiance and I bought a house and we started planning our wedding. And of course, my mom wanted to help me plan it. I really didn't want this, but I decided to give her a chance. But once again, she managed to make everything about her. The entire time, she criticized my choices, even my wedding dress, which I absolutely loved, and it really did look good on me. She told me I needed to wear something more flattering. And then she ended up wearing my wedding dress in a different color. After the wedding, I decided to tell my dad and my brothers that I was going to cut my mom off. My dad begged me not to, but I still went ahead and did it. I called my mom and told her that I needed some time apart from her and that I did not want her calling me. Of course, she pretended like she had never done anything wrong in my life and that she's only been the perfect dedicated mother that she wishes she could be. Instead of arguing with her, I told her to just give me some space. She agreed to it and I haven't spoken to her in about 3 months. My dad and grandma keep begging me to talk to her. I don't think my mom is sad at all. She's always posting to her Instagram. She goes to Pilates, brunch with her friends, and travels with my dad. I think she's probably fine, but what should I do? Am I the asshole for cutting off my jealous mom? When I was going through puberty, my mom started comparing my body to hers. She would say things like, you know what, it's okay that you're not developing as quickly as I did. Or that her boobs were already much bigger than mine were when I was 14. Here's a little backstory on my family. My mom has always been extremely dramatic and I think toxic. But I feel bad calling her toxic. On the other hand, I have a great relationship with my dad. And my 2 siblings are both guys, so they don't have the same experience I did with my mom. My dad always acted as a buffer between me and my mom, even though my mom was the one that was starting all the fights. When I got into high school, I realized how attractive I was. Honestly, I had no clue that I was even a pretty girl. Looking back now, I realized that my mom really did make me feel like I was less than. When I started getting attention from boys in high school, I was really happy. I finally felt like I was seen. And because my mom wasn't there, I was able to thrive. Whereas in my house, I would even dress down in front of my mom just so that she wouldn't get jealous of me. The first time I brought a boy over to our house, my mom totally flipped out. She said that I was acting like an SLUT, but really, this boy was only a friend. My dad, thank God, told her that she needed to relax and that I was allowed to have friends. Eventually, I started dating a boy behind my mom's back. I did tell my dad, though. My dad was actually happy for me. This boyfriend was like my best friend. I could tell him everything, and he always responded really positively and gave me really good advice about my mom. But one day, one of my brothers let it slip that I had a boyfriend. My mom punished me for an entire month. My dad tried to intervene, but my mom went crazy. Here's the thing. She made me break up with him, and then I caught her flirting with him. Part 2 is up. Am I the asshole for using my boyfriend's toothbrush to clean the toilet whenever I get mad at him? Anytime I get mad at him, I just find little ways to sabotage him. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. My boyfriend and I have been together for 2 years. From the beginning of the relationship, I had to chase him. He was dating a few girls when I first met him, but I managed to bag him. The problem is that he knows that I was the one that was chasing him. He never had to court me or anything, so he knows he can get away with a lot. For example, we live together and he never cleans the apartment. He automatically assumes that I will do his laundry, his cooking, and cleaning. I have to make the bed every single morning when we both get up. I have to make him his breakfast and literally be his mother the entire day. Worst of all, we've both been working from home because of COVID, so this means I have to cater to him all day long, even when I'm in my meetings. And because I don't want to cause any fights or confront him about it, I started to retaliate in my own way. Number 1, I started cleaning the toilet with his toothbrush. Sounds terrible, I know. I need some way to release this anger though. It gets worse. Part 2 is up. Am I the asshole for using my boyfriend's toothbrush to clean the toilet? Because he uses me as his personal maid, I had to find a way to retaliate. Using his toothbrush on the toilet was the clear answer, but it didn't stop there. Anytime he would leave his dishes unclean or ask me to do his laundry, I started to do other things. Recently, I've been putting dairy in his food, which I know he can't have because it gives him the runs. I switched out his special shampoo for regular old Dollar Tree shampoo. Anytime his packages would arrive, I would just hide them somewhere in the apartment, and whenever he would go crazy waiting for it, I would finally say, oh, this package? Oh, that's been here for like 4 days already. The look on his face was so worth it. A few nights ago, after I worked all day and cleaned and made him his food, he asked me for a massage. By the way, it was 7 p.m. and I was finally ready to relax myself. So I told him that I didn't feel like it because I was tired. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat down on the couch and started watching a movie. He decided to throw a tantrum. He stood in front of the TV and asked me for a massage again. I mean, he's a grown man. Part 3 is up. The asshole for using my boyfriend's toothbrush to clean the toilet. After he stood in front of the TV blocking my view, he asked me for a massage a second time. And once again, I said no, I'm tired. Then he starts complaining about the lunch I made him. He said the pasta was overcooked and the sauce tasted weird, which it probably did because I did put dairy in it. Instead of holding my ground, I told him fine. And I proceeded to give him a 30-minute massage when I was so tired myself. I'm sure you're wondering if I love him. The answer is yes. I love him very much, which is why I don't want to break up with him, but I'm really close to having had enough. He never offers to help me. He never offers me a massage. He expects me to clean and do everything for him. When I've asked him for help, he doesn't really want to. So I don't think he's gonna change that part of himself. But I do have fun with him and he's an amazing guy. I don't know what to do. Should I leave him? Should I stay? Or do you guys have any ideas on what sabotages I could do next? Help a girl out. Bye. Story time about how my neighbor is stealing my packages, stalking me, but denies everything. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I moved into a really nice apartment 3 weeks ago. It's a 1-bedroom apartment and the building has a bunch of amenities. There's even a doorman in the lobby. I felt super safe when I moved in, but 2 days after I moved in, weird things started happening. I'm lucky enough to make content for a living, which means I get sent a lot of packages to my apartment. On the second day that I moved in, my friends were over and helping me unpack everything. Suddenly, we noticed that my front door was open and 2 of my packages were missing. I locked the door and could have sworn that I had left the packages right there. I looked for them everywhere and couldn't find them. Later that night, after my friends went home, someone rang on my doorbell, but when I opened the door, no one was there. It happened a second and third time. Finally, I went online and ordered the Ring doorbell. I finally installed it, and you wouldn't imagine the things I caught on camera. At 2 in the morning the following day, I see a strange man ring my doorbell and run away. This guy was in his early 30s, wearing a black hoodie, black pants, and he had a tattoo on his pinky finger. Couldn't really see his face though. When I saw the footage the next morning, I was really scared. I took it downstairs and I showed the guy at the lobby. He told me that it was probably someone who got into the apartment and not to worry about it. I mean, they always tell you not to worry about these things, but this is the kind of stuff that you do need to worry about. A few days later, I was expecting a package. I decided to go run some errands while I waited for the package to arrive. Finally got the text message saying that it was delivered to my front door. But when I show up to my front door, the package is not there. I go straight to my Ring camera and I see that the same guy had taken the package. I was furious. I went downstairs and showed the video to the guy in the lobby, and he told me to contact management. Called them, but they didn't answer, so I left an email. Sent them the 2 videos I had, but they took a week to reply back. Meanwhile, this guy continues to come to my apartment, ring the doorbell, and leave, and steals most of my deliveries. Luckily, during Christmas, I flew home to be with my parents. I knew I wouldn't be receiving any deliveries, but I still kept watch of my Ring doorbell. At 1 a.m., I got a notification from my Ring doorbell that someone was there. It was the same guy, in the same exact outfit. He pressed his ear up against my door, trying to hear what I was doing. Woke up my parents, showed them the footage, and they were horrified. My dad called the building management, and he finally got through to them. He asked to get footage from the cameras in my hallways, but they told him that the cameras didn't work. That's when my dad insisted that they find the guy who was doing this. Management said that they didn't recognize the man in the video. Part 2 is up. 2 of how my neighbor is stalking me and stealing all my packages but denies it. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. After I caught this guy on my Ring doorbell several times, I sent it to my building management, but they said they didn't recognize him. They told me that he probably didn't live in the building. My parents insisted that they change all the locks on the doors. They said it would be a huge inconvenience for them because it meant a lot of money, that they would have to issue new keys to every tenant in the apartment. That's when my dad told them that he would involve his lawyer, aka my uncle. The building management basically ghosted me and my parents, and eventually I had to go back to my apartment after the holidays. Told my parents I would be fine and that the guy would probably never come back. Boy, was I wrong. 2 days after I arrived back to my apartment, everything looked totally normal. My apartment building had a really nice gym, and that's where I would go work out. While I was on the treadmill, I see someone outside of the gym door, and when I saw who was standing there, I recognized him as the person in the videos. He was wearing a black hoodie and black pants. He wasn't looking straight into the gym, but he was hovering by the door. I literally jumped off the treadmill like a cat. Went straight to the door, but when he saw me, he started running away. I was ready to attack this guy. When I finally opened the door, he was gone. But this really made me angry. It meant that I was being watched at the gym and at my own apartment. It didn't feel safe. I was paying $2,500 a month for my 1 bedroom, but it didn't feel like a home. I decided not to tell my parents because I knew this would totally freak them out. Went back upstairs to my apartment and got ready for bed. At 11 p.m., I got another notification from my Ring doorbell. This time I could see him pressing his ear up against my door again, but this time I could see part of his face. He had a nose ring and a neck tattoo. I took a screenshot and sent it to my building management. That's when they told me that it could possibly be the person that lived in the 2nd floor. That they couldn't be sure and they couldn't really just show up to someone's apartment and accuse them of something like this. Because I'm so stubborn, I told them that I would handle it myself. The next morning, I got dressed and went straight to the 2nd floor. I knocked on every single door on the 2nd floor, and they were pretty much all women. Finally, this guy opens the door and he has a nose ring. I asked him if he'd been by my apartment, but he denied it. He basically acted like he had never seen my face before. He acted so well that I started doubting it was him, even though I could see he had a nose ring. He had a purple hoodie on, which covered his neck, so I couldn't tell if he had a tattoo. I apologized and went back upstairs. I decided to go to the gym once again, but as I'm working out again, I see the guy in the black hoodie outside the door. Part 3 is up. Of how my neighbor is stalking me, stealing my deliveries, but denies everything. Disclaimers are not my story time. It's me on Instagram. While I was working out at the gym, again I see the same guy in the black hoodie. But this time I wasn't gonna let him get away. Ran to the door, and when I opened it, he was halfway gone. That's when I decided to chase him. Instead of running out of the building, he ran up the stairs. I knew exactly where he was going. But here's the problem. He was much faster than me. When I got up to the second floor, he had basically disappeared. I knew that this guy lived on the second floor. I went straight to his door and knocked. Of course, he didn't open. I stood there for a few seconds contemplating what I should do. Suddenly, a few doors down, a door opens. Out comes this really beautiful girl. She starts asking me if I was okay. That's when I broke down. I started to cry and I told her everything. She invited me into her apartment and she gave me a glass of water. Then she confirmed my worst fears. She told me she'd been having problems with one of her neighbors, that most of the girls on her floor were complaining about the same thing. Apparently, I wasn't the first person complaining to management about this one person. She showed me all the emails that she had sent management about this guy. Apparently, he would knock on her door and run away. She told me that some of her packages were also missing and that he would try to find her in the elevators. Then we both walked over to another girl's apartment. This girl proceeded to tell me the exact same things, that he had been stealing her packages, showing up at her door, and watching her. I felt so much better knowing that I wasn't the only one this was happening to, but we knew that we needed to do something. We all showed up at the management's office with all our complaints, but management says that there's no actual proof that this is the guy. They flat out denied to do anything about it. So now all the women in the building are watching out for each other. I want to confront this guy, but I'm not sure what to say. Pretty sure he's reselling all the packages that he steals too. What should we do? Story time about how I did the dirty with my crush's brother just to get him jealous. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I just turned 23 years old and I've been in love with the same guy for 5 years. This guy, let's call him Chad. He's always said to me that he doesn't want a girlfriend, but then he'll call me at night for, you know what? I decided to ghost him for a month just to see what would happen, but he didn't even contact me. This obviously hurt my feelings because I was totally in love with him. I would have given anything to be in a serious relationship with him, but all he wanted was to party and hang out with other girls too. He started posting other girls to his story and it made me furious. I couldn't believe that he was doing that to me, but at the same time I couldn't hold it against him. Nonetheless, I was brokenhearted. I decided to date a few guys, but nothing worked. All I kept thinking about was stupid Chad. A little backstory about Chad. He has two brothers, one is older and one is younger. The older one is really attractive, and he's also liked me for a very long time, but he also knows that I'm totally in love with Chad, so he never really tried to talk to me because of that. Let's call him Jake. I decided to slide into Jake's DMs, and I told him that I thought he was really hot. He replied right away. Then he said that he had always had a crush on me, but he thought that I was in love with Chad. I lied and told him that I didn't have feelings for Chad, and that I was totally free to date and see whoever I wanted. He wasted no time and asked me out on a date. We ended up having a picnic on the beach for our first date. It was actually super romantic and really nice. We spent about 6 hours at the beach, and of course, I needed to make Chad jealous, so I took pictures with Jake and posted them to my story. A minute after I posted them, Chad started messaging me. He's asking me why I'm with his brother, so I simply responded by saying that he had no right to ask me anything. Then he calls me, but I decided to ignore the call. And suddenly, Jake kissed me. He said he'd been wanting to do of how I did the dirty with my crush's boyfriend just to get him jealous. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. After Jake kissed me, I see I have 5 missed calls from Chad, and I pretty much ignored him the entire night. Jake took me home and nothing else happened. Next morning, I wake up to a missed call from Chad, and also a voice memo. In the voice memo, he starts telling me that he misses me and that he really wants to see me again. My plan was just to completely ignore him, but I caved. I sent him a voice memo back saying that if he wanted something serious with me, that I would totally consider it. Otherwise, I didn't want him to talk to me. He then left me on red. Yep, that's right. He ghosted me again. That's when I called Jake and asked him if he wanted to come over to my place. By the way, at this point, I don't really have feelings for Jake, and I'm totally aware that I was just using him, which I do feel bad for, but it worked. Jake came over and we ordered pizza. We sat down to watch a movie, but of course I pulled out my phone and started posting to my stories. Once again, Chad replies asking me why his brother is at my house, and that's when I really decided to ignore him. I left him on red, and boy did it feel good. Then I see a text from Chad saying I'm coming over. I didn't know what to do, so I told Jake that I needed him to leave because I had work. Part 3 is up. 3 of how I did the dirty with my crush's brother just to get him jealous. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Chad tells me that he's coming over to my place because he's super jealous. I have no choice but to tell Jake to leave. But Jake was super sweet about it and he said he totally understood. He gave me a kiss and left. Not even 2 minutes later, Chad shows up at my door. He comes in and starts asking me questions about his brother and I. Told him he had no right to be jealous or to even ask me any questions because he didn't want a relationship. Then he tried to kiss me and I couldn't resist. We started to kiss and before I knew it, we were, know? After it was over, I came to my senses and told him to leave. Of course, he pretended to be outraged. He told me that he couldn't believe that I was treating him this way. And that's when I said, well, you've been treating me this way for the past 5 years. He had no comeback. Once again, I asked him to leave and he did. A few hours later, I go to chat's story and he's hanging out with 2 girls. All I could do was cry. So I knew I needed to one-up him. The following night, I go out with his brother and we do it. I posted a picture of his arm in my bed and this sent Chad into a rage. He calls me, but I ignored all the phone calls. That's when I knew I had to tell Jake to go home before Chad showed up. I pretended to feel sick and asked Jake if he could go home. Chad shows up once again to my house. He asked me if anything happened between his brother and I, and of course I said yes. Out of nowhere, he asked me to be his girlfriend. He tells me that this whole time he's actually been in love with me, but that story time about how my high school principal tried to date me after I graduated. TW, if you think this is gross, don't watch. And disclaimers is not my story time. It's been 10 years since this happened, but when I was in high school, I was really popular. I was in the cheerleading squad, the badminton team, the volleyball team, and drama club. All the teachers knew me and I got along with almost all the students. I never had any problems with girls or guys. My high school principal was a huge history buff, and so was I. One day I went to his office and asked him if I could start a history club. He was really impressed by this and he said yes. I started asking students if they wanted to join, and mostly it was only boys. And these were the boys that I knew had a crush on me, but I made a promise to my parents that I would focus solely on school and not boys. So that meant no boyfriends for me. And I was totally fine with that. I wasn't boy crazy or anything. I really just wanted to get into a good college and make my parents proud. After I formed the club, the principal asked me if he could sit in on some of the sessions. I said, of course. Our history club would get together every Wednesday, and he would always show up without fail. I mean, obviously, I thought that he was interested in history, and he just wanted to share this experience with us, but clearly I was wrong. After a few weeks, things were getting a little strange. When it was my turn to read, I would always notice him staring at me. And he also brought up the fact that there were only boys in the club. I explained to him that they probably just had a crush on me and that at least it was a way to get them into the club. He told me I needed to find girls because I was too much of a distraction for the boys. But the way that he said it just sounded like he was really jealous. I did my best to get girls in the club, but literally nobody wanted to join. After a few days, I realized that maybe the best thing for me was just to cancel the club. I was already in so many other clubs and I didn't want to sacrifice my grades. I basically told the guys that we weren't going to have the club anymore, and they all said that was totally fine. But when I told the principal, he flipped out. He started yelling at me and told me that if I didn't keep the club going, that I would never make it in life. He said I wasn't being responsible and that I was letting down the club. So then I was basically forced into continuing the club. But then things got even stranger. He started showing up to every single get-together. And every time that it was over, he would ask me if he could walk me to my car. I mean, at first I thought he was just doing it so that I could be careful, I guess. But we were still on school property and I'm pretty sure nothing was gonna happen to me. That's when he started asking me if I had a boyfriend or if I liked any boys. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how my high school principal tried to date me after I graduated. Trigger warning, if you find this subject gross, please don't watch. And disclaimer, this is not my story time. That's when my principal started asking me if I was dating any boys or if I had any crushes on boys. I obviously felt very uncomfortable when he asked me this, so I simply answered no. Then he told me that I could be honest with him. That's when I told him that I made my parents a promise because I was so close to graduating high school and avoid any distractions like boys. That's when he said that I was an amazing woman and that he wished more of the female students were like me. I quickly got in my car and went home. By the way, I was 2 months away from graduating from high school. Now this is when things start to get really weird. I started seeing him around everywhere in school. Our school is pretty big, but I kept bumping into him everywhere. Every time I would see him, he would be like, "Ho ho, are you stalking me?" I would laugh it off and continue walking. One day after history club, he asked me to come to his office with him. He said that he had a surprise for me. He took me to his office and gave me a book on history. I thanked him and tried to leave as quickly as possible, but then he said, "Don't you like it?" So I stood there having to pretend that I was happy that he gave me this book, when in actuality, it made me really uncomfortable. That's when he said that he had seen me in the library reading a book on World War II, and that he just wanted to surprise me with the same book. So this was already letting me know 2 things. Number 1, he's watching me around school and at the library. And number 2, I'm not noticing when he's watching me. I was so creeped out, but I managed to keep my cool. I said thank you again and basically ran away. For the rest of that week, I tried to avoid him as much as I could. I didn't go anywhere near his office, and I avoided the library, which was one of my favorite places in the school. Part 3 of how my high school principal tried to date me after I graduated. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. After he hands me the blank check, I look at it and tell him that I simply cannot accept it. That's when he gets really angry, snatches the check from me, and tells me that he'll see me later. After the graduation ceremony, I was so happy and I was with my family. That's when he walks up behind me and asks me to keep the check. My family is watching this whole thing go down, by the way. I look at him and say thank you, but no. He then introduces himself to my family. But of course, he doesn't bring up the whole check thing. We all say goodbye and my family and I go have dinner. That very night, he sends me a message on Facebook again, saying that he shouldn't have given me the check. and he felt like he had crossed the line. I actually felt really bad, so I replied asking him to not feel bad. A week later, I get a text message from him. He said that he took the liberty of looking up my phone number and that he actually really wanted to speak to me. He asked if we could meet up for a coffee, and I said yes, unfortunately. We meet up at the coffee shop, and as soon as we sit down, he starts to confess his feelings for me. He said that I was basically his dream girl and that all he wanted was a wife like me. And he also asked me if I would ever consider dating him. I was actually too stunned to speak. As soon as he realized I wasn't saying yes, he asked me not to say anything, got up and left. I ran home and told my parents everything. My parents were really angry. My dad went straight to the cops. The cops told my dad that they had complaints from other students. He apparently did the same thing to them and asked them out once they graduated. And guess what? One of them said yes. The cops even investigated him after.